and I have enabled the live transcript as well. So thank you again for everyone who has taken the time to be here with us today. So GSPA is Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs is facilitating this workshop on the 2022 GRADflix competition in partnership with the Writing and Communication Center and Library Services, who are here to lend us their support, which we thank them for very much. So just getting into the agenda for today's session. Here we go. Before we do that, I'd like to do a brief territorial acknowledgement. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place in the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, technology, and community building, and is centralized within our Indigenous Initiatives Office. If you want to learn more about this subject, we encourage you to check out that Indigenous Initiatives Office for more information on reconciliation and the various territorial aspects related to the University of Waterloo. So moving on from here. So the agenda for today, we are breaking this webinar down to 5 distinct sections. So first, my colleague Angela Rook will be introducing the competition, giving you a brief overview of what is GRADflix, how do you participate in it, what are the different rules and important dates. Then she'll be turning it back to me, where I'm going to briefly explain some of the tools and tips that you can use to create your 60-second video. So what kind of videos you can create, how you actually go about starting those videos. And then we're going to turn it over to our colleague Elise from the Writing and Communication Center, who's going to lead us through a presentation on how to actually communicate your research in a 60-second video. So going over communication strategies more directly. Then Lauren Beal from Library Services will be sharing some copyright considerations with us, so walking you through what are some of the tips that you can use to make sure that you don't run into any copyright issues during the creation of your video. And then finally, we'll conclude with a live Q&A with all the panelists, where you can ask any questions that have come up during the course of the webinar. I have here on the side as well just a repetition of the different housekeeping notes I mentioned earlier. So the session is being recorded. A copy will be available under the training session section of the GRADflix resources page by the end of this week. And again, questions can be submitted through the Zoom Q&A at any time and can be made anonymously if you so choose. So with that, I'm going to kick things off by turning it over to my colleague Angela, where she will share her screen now, if she doesn't mind, and introduce the competition to all of you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Graham?
I can indeed.
Perfect. Just going to arrange my slide share. And I think we are good to go. So welcome, everyone. I am so excited to tell you about our GRADflix competition. This is one of my favorite things that we do in graduate studies and postdoctoral affairs, and I really just want to take some time to encourage you to participate. It's just such a fun way to showcase the research, the amazing research that our graduate students are doing. And it was so awesome to see the range of disciplines that you're coming from here. We have had finalists from all 6 faculties. We have had winners in a range of different fields. Please do not think for a moment that, you know, whatever your field is, it's too difficult. One of the beautiful things about video is that I feel like it gives you much more, a range of so many different ways that you can explain your research. So you're both using potentially words and music, as well as moving images. And I think regardless of what your thesis topic is, GRADflix is the competition for you. And on top of that, it's just so much fun. We've heard from so many of our previous finalists how much fun they had doing the competition, getting an outlet to be creative. So yeah, there's my pitch right off the bat, but I will get into a little bit more details. So GRADflix is a University of Waterloo initiative. We developed the competition from scratch and we launched it in 2018. So it's relatively new. Since then, several other universities have taken our lead. And I could see sometime in the future there being even potentially a provincial or national level GRADflix competition. But for right now, the competition resides just within the University of Waterloo. And it's a research communication opportunity where you create a video, a moving slideshow, or an animation of no more than 60 seconds, so 1 minute in length, and that video has to describe your research. So what do I mean by video? Video can take many forms, but it has to include some kind of movement. And so that movement can be, transitioning between PowerPoint slides. It could be zooming in on a subject, or it could be a subject moving on the video. So it's pretty broad. And then it also has to include some kind of sound. So that could be a voiceover. We've had some students sort of recording their voice, talking about their research. Others have just used sound effects and music. So pretty broad definition of video. And to be eligible to participate in GRADflix, you have to be a current University of Waterloo grad student registered in a master's. And if you're a master's student, you have to be in either a thesis or an MRP, a master's research program, or you can be in a PhD program. So really, we want it to be focused on research being conducted to pursue your degree. So that means if you're, say, a first-year PhD student, we don't want you doing a GRADflix video on something on your master's research from a previous university or from a previous degree. The GRADflix video has to be on the research you're conducting for your current degree that you're pursuing. Additionally, if you happen to have completed all degree requirements, but you have not yet convocated, you are still eligible to compete. And again, the only other real thing, like, you retain the rights to your video. That video is yours forever, but you do have to agree to allow us to make your video public. We will post it on our YouTube channel. And additionally, if you make it to the showcase, that will be streamed on YouTube and, put up on our websites. We're really trying to promote you and your video. And so part of the agreement is that you're just allowing us to use that video, even though you still own it. Another thing that you'll just have to do if you decide to submit a video is you'll have to send us some information, like your preferred name, if it's different from your legal name, your preferred pronouns, the name of your supervisor, as well as a good quality headshot photo and a short biography. As you can see on our website, anybody who makes it to the finals, we do sort of a profile of each student so that we can feature you as well as your research on our website. The important thing to remember, because I could see, I think back to when I was a PhD student, if someone said, can you make a video about your research? I would have said, absolutely not. I don't have the skills. So the important thing to remember is that first and foremost, this is a research communication competition. And so the judging criteria, 50% of your score goes to communication. This is what we're really trying to teach you. Technical quality is only worth 20%. Obviously, it's easier to communicate your message with a highly or like a well done video, I guess. But I just want to emphasize the fact that it's really about the story and how you tell it. And so certainly part of that is how you visualize it in the video. But I just don't want you to be afraid. If you've never made a video, that is our expectation. We don't anticipate that so many of our graduate students are, on the side, they make these videos professionally or anything. And Graham will go over some options about how you can do this relatively easily with no previous experience. But this is the judging criteria, just to give you a sense of the breakdown. And most of those who have participated in GRADflix in previous years have said they have participated first and foremost just because it sounded interesting and unique. But I know that monetary prizes are also important, especially for students. So we actually have 5 prizes in total. These are cash prizes that will be awarded as scholarships posted to the winner's student account. So the first place prize is $750, all the way down to the 4th place prize of $250. And then we have a People's Choice Award at the live showcase event where the audience votes for the People's Choice Award, and that's worth $250 as well. And you could, in theory, win the People's Choice Award as well as another placed prize that are determined by the judges. So these are some of our important dates. As you can see, we're in the big training session. That's today, November 1st. And we will, on November 17th, have a drop-in feedback session. And these drop-in feedback sessions are just such a cool opportunity for you to come, show us what you have, get some feedback. At some point, you might be coming in just with a vague idea and a script or a storyboard. Others may come in with a full first draft of the video. It depends on where you're at, but just come in. It can be just a conversation. It could be showing us something and giving you feedback. So those feedback sessions are crucial. But the other crucial date is November 24th. This is the day by which you have to have registered for GRADflix. So some of you may be here today just trying to decide whether to participate, but by November 24th, that's the time that you have to decide for sure. That's the deadline. We will have another feedback session after that on December 1st. And you don't have to actually submit your video to us until January 10th. So lots of time, including the Christmas break, to really refine it. And then I encourage all of you to save the date of January 31st for our virtual showcase event. Back when we were able to do events in person, we would rent a red carpet, we would take over the board and senate room and serve popcorn. It was a really fun live event. And last year we had to obviously shift the event to be virtual. And so I'll show you what we did to try to make it equally special. And this is sort of what you would expect this year. So anyone whose video made it to the final competition, which is about typically around 25 videos, got a box with some popcorn and sort of movie theater snacks. We sort of created these digital assets to make it feel like a red carpet event. And what you can see in the bottom left of your screen there is we were able to share this live on YouTube. And so people's family members from all over the world were tuning in live to cheer on the person they knew who were participating in GRADflix. And it was so neat to be bringing people together all over the country. I personally think the event is even better virtually than it is in person. And some other students, as you can see on the right, had their whole lab get together and watch the stream live as a group to cheer on their one lab mate who is participating. So it's a fantastic competition, a fantastic opportunity to get your research out there, whether that be to do a little bit of self-promotion for future jobs that you may wish to apply for. We've had students say that their GRADflix video has resulted in offers for new research collaborations. There's just so many different reasons to participate, and I hope you will consider registering. I'm happy to answer some questions once we get to the Q&A period, but thank you, and I will pass it back over to Graham now.
Thank you so much, Angela. So I'm going to share my screen again here. And I'd actually just like to pick up right where Angela left off. And Angela mentioned this towards the very beginning, but we're just gonna go over a couple reasons why you might want to participate, other than the fact that it's a lot of fun and a really great opportunity to sort of connect with other people in the University of Waterloo community. What are some other reasons why you might want to participate in the GRADflix competition? So there's a number of different reasons here, and chief among them personally, for my money, is the first one here, which is develop and broaden your communications. So the GRADflix competition really encourages you to learn a new skill. Many of us probably do not typically communicate our research projects or activities through this kind of condensed digital narrative format. And this is a really great opportunity to develop your ability to communicate your research.
Graham?
Sorry. Yes,
sorry to interrupt. I'm getting lots of feedback, so I don't know if it's someone who's not muted or if it's from your own microphone.
It shouldn't be from my microphone because I'm using the headset. Can I ask if all the panelists have their computer's audio muted?
Sounds good now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for letting me know. So as I was saying, this is a fantastic idea to basically develop your elevator pitch style of communicating your research. It's something that I personally really benefited from in my PhD program early on. but it's also a way to broaden your communication skills and develop the appropriate strategies for communicating your research to a non-technical or non-specialist audience, because again, the audience for GRADflix competitions are wide-ranging. It's the entire University of Waterloo community, so it won't necessarily be people within your faculty or department. So this is a fantastic opportunity to learn how to communicate your experience and your knowledge in a way that's accessible to a wider audience. And that's a really important skill to develop both personally and professionally going forward in your careers. Another really key element for participating in the GRADflix competition is the opportunity to expand your network and gain greater exposure for your research. So having this sort of short video that you can share online can be a very valuable professional tool, as well as just being a lot of fun to create. You could share on your LinkedIn profile. You also can be, if you are one of the finalists, you can be showcased in the January showcase event. So it's a really great opportunity to be able to share your research a little bit more widely and get that kind of exposure as well. Fourth, it's an opportunity to win prizes. As Angela mentioned, there are prizes available. So who doesn't want to have the chance to win prizes in addition to doing all these professional development sort of opportunities here? Also, it provides you an opportunity to apply these skills that you've learned through the competition to your teaching. If you're a graduate student who is also teaching courses or classes, this is a great opportunity to sort of start thinking through communication strategies for, again, communicating complex information to audiences that may not have your level of specialized expertise. And finally, you can also enter other competitions. So a good example of this is Shirk Storytellers competition, which you can basically use a very similar, if not identical, video for. So these same skills and even the same sort of digital assets that you're cultivating through this competition can be used for other competitions as well. But I don't just want you to take our word for it. I'd also like you to consider this interview from the winner of the 2021 GRADflix.
I'm not hearing the audio.
Oh. Thank you for mentioning that you're not hearing the audio. There we go. That should fix it. Can you hear the audio now?
I really enjoy illustrating, and a lot of my master's thus far has been reading and writing, and I really wanted to be able to do something with my hands. So I drew everything on my remarkable tablet. I drew out every frame. So like here are images of a little person climbing a ladder, and I would put it all together in Adobe Illustrator. And then I moved all the images from Adobe Illustrator to Adobe Premiere. I also went back and I looked at previous winners' different 1-minute thesis pitch videos from around the world. And I made sure that my script was the same length. I wasn't trying to cram in too many ideas so that somebody could watch it and really just digest one idea clearly. I am working on creating a greater presence for my research online, because I think it's important to share the research that we do, especially if you're getting scholarships or working in a lab. You want your research to get out there. And sadly, so little research actually does make it to the public eyes. For future participants of GRADflix, even if you are just thinking about it, please keep this on your radar. Take some time to think about how you might put your research into a video, because it was a really worthwhile experience and I highly recommend it.
So yeah, that is just a succinct sort of description from one of our past winners as of all the different reasons why you'd want to be participating in this competition. So all that's well and good, but how do we actually get started on this? So what are some tools and tips you can use to actually start creating this 60-second video? So I'm going to go over those briefly now. So what are some different video options? What are the different types of videos that you can make for this competition? And we're going to go over 4 basic archetypes for the videos that you can make. And these are not mutually exclusive. You can mix and match or use hybrid versions of these, as we'll discuss. But these are but broadly speaking, the categories of videos that you want to be doing will fall into one of these 4. So first of all, first type that we can look at is the live action video. And a live action video is a video that depicts a real person or a real environment, typically with the person talking or with a voiceover. We have a quick example here.
Hey Hayden, what's up? Oh, hey, come here. I'm just researching how and in what ways German architects, citizens, and urban planners rebuilt the beautiful city of Munich.
Rebuilt?
Yeah, come check it out.
So that's the beginning, at least, of an actual GRADflix video. And this is a quick and simple option for a video that is focused and relatable. It's one of the less time-consuming methods that you can use. And it's probably the one that requires among the least technical expertise. So you can easily film this on a smartphone, cutting the video together using editing software after the fact. And it's a good method for getting your face, voice, and personality out there to your audience. So some of the strengths of that is that it's easy and fast. It focuses attention on what you're saying and also helps you build rapport with the audience because you can easily sort of show off your body language, right? You can sort of convey the importance of the subject through the different body language, tone of voice, and things like that that you want to be using during the video. Some of the weaknesses of this type is that it's not always as effective at conveying complex ideas or technical terminology. And for that, you might want to use a different video style.
Hey,
So no-
Hayden.
So another video style that we can look at here is the screencast. And that's a video that depicts a person's computer screen with voiceover. So it's another very easy method. You can basically have a video or a game or program operating on your computer, and you can record it similar to how you might share your screen in an online webinar. PowerPoint actually allows you to do this quite easily, giving you the option to include audios or cursors or anything like that. So this is one of the things that's really valuable. This is it's easy to set up and you can film it from the comfort of your desk. And it can also lead to a very dynamic visual engagement that complements the content that you're actually talking about during the video. So I'll show another short example here.
Players control avatars through a narrative, where they offer empathy to in-game characters to progress play as we measure engagement. This is the first study on whether gamification with narratives and avatars can encourage peer support for mental health.
Yeah, so again, as you can see, the presenter there had a voiceover that was an overlay for an actual game that was being played at the same time to illustrate the different concepts that they were talking about. And this works best with dynamic sort of ongoing visual action, like a game as we saw, or some kind of program tutorial, things like that. One of the weaknesses of this is that it can sometimes be distracting. If there's too much visual information on the screen, it's not always going to be easy for the audience to focus on what you're actually saying. So notice, for example, in that example video, there was a moment in the explanation where not only was the presenter speaking, but there was visual information on the screen, there was text on the screen, there was different movements happening on the screen, and that can be a lot of different things for the audience to focus on. So what I'm trying to get across here is that each of these different types have both strengths and weaknesses depending on what your goals are for your research presentation here. And you have to sort of consider what is going to be the best approach for the kind of research that you're trying to convey. The third major type of video that we can look at here is animation. This is a video that depicts animated or cartoon figures explaining or doing things or doing something, usually with a voiceover of some kind. So we can see an example of that here.
I will start by researching the effects of a children's magazine on speech and language development. Towards that aim, I will conduct a qualitative study involving interviews with children, teachers, and scholars. Finally, I will prepare a prototype by applying the findings I have obtained.
So one of the real benefits of animation is that it's a really fun medium that allows for a lot of creativity and flexibility in the kind of video that you're creating. Through animation, you can depict elaborate concepts that you can use to illustrate the different types of ideas that you're trying to convey. And you can also depict different scenarios that would be difficult to film directly or capture in other formats. So from the example that we see here, we saw a scenario of a presentation in a classroom, which might be hard to depict if you're just filming off of a smartphone or something like that. And it can be a highly engaging medium on a visual level. It can be very useful for having complex dynamic graphics to explain difficult ideas or concepts to a general audience. Again, some of the weaknesses are similar to the screencast. It can be a lot of visual information on the screen at the same time. It can sort of be a struggle for some audiences to not get distracted with what's going on the screen. And you want to make sure that the visuals or the animation that you're using has a purpose and that it's actually augmenting the content and what you're trying to say rather than distracting from it. And that's something that Elise will get into more in terms of the pairing of your visuals and auditory content later on in this webinar. The other main weakness of the animation is that it's probably the most time consuming, maybe on par with the next one we're going to talk about. But it's a very time consuming process. You need to make sure that you have a script well defined and settled before you start animating, because revisions to this type of medium will be much more time consuming than revisions in other mediums. So the fourth and final main type that we're going to be looking at is stop motion. So I've seen some really creative and interesting stop motion videos for the GRADflix competition. And a stop motion video is a video in which one frame is captured at a time with objects moved slightly in between each shot. So you've probably seen this before in various formats, but here's a quick example from the GRADflix competition.
Peatlands are a special type of wetland made up of layers of plant matter. Plants in peatlands take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in their tissues. When they die, the water stops them from decomposing and releasing that carbon. This keeps it out of the air, where it would become carbon dioxide or methane, two of the greenhouse gases that cause global warming.
So again, some of the strengths of this is that, as you can see, it really opens the door for a lot of different creativity in how you're presenting your content. It allows for visuals that really augment and clarify ideas that you're trying to convey, that it might be difficult to convey purely just by speaking out loud. It can be visually very distinct and engaging for audience to see. It's not something that we typically see in our day-to-day lives. So it's definitely sort of eye-catching in that respect and really grabs the audience's attention, I find. Some of the weaknesses, similar to the animation style, it can be very labor-intensive. It might require drawing skills depending on what kind of stop motion you're using. And it's a little bit more limited than animation in terms of how dynamic the visuals can be. But again, there are strengths and weaknesses for each of these different video types. And as I mentioned before, don't think of these as mutually exclusive different types here. Most videos will be mixed media to some extent, insofar as they'll involve a combination of audio, animation, still images, video, screencast, or something like that. Often, you'll see people transition from a live action video portion at the beginning to a screencast or a slideshow or static images or something to that nature. So feel free to get creative in terms of how you mix and match these different types of video in a way that's going to suit your actual purposes for this competition. So building upon some of the things we were talking about about the different kinds of videos you want to be using for this competition, a common question we get asked is, do I need to be an expert in order to actually participate in this competition? And the answer is an emphatic no. You do not need to have any prior experience of video creation to excel in the GRADflix competition. Just as an illustration of this, these are some skills and tools that you likely already have, or at least many of us already have. And that's, if you have a smartphone, or if you are able to use PowerPoint, perhaps through your university account, for example, or if you're able to draw, sketch, or create graphics already. Any one of these different tools could allow you to create a video fairly quickly and simply. So PowerPoint is, as we'll talk about a bit later, a useful tool and a surprisingly robust way of generating videos, generating basic videos at least. It has a variety of different tools that you can use to that end. Smartphones, again, surprisingly robust tool for not only filming, but actually editing through a couple of different apps that are free to use. So don't feel daunted or discouraged or overwhelmed by the prospect of making a 60-second video. Even if you've never done it before, there's lots of different tools that you can use that make it quite intuitive and a lot of fun to just get started and get learning. Yeah. So when it comes to live action videos, smartphones are a really valuable tool for this. Director Steven Soderbergh, known for films including Ocean's 11, shot his latest film entirely on an iPhone. The Mobile Film Festival, which does one mobile, 1 minute, one film projects, has been running since 2005. And in our first year of GRADflix, our co-op student with no prior experience filmed and edited a 1 minute video entirely on her smartphone in less than 4 hours. So it's definitely possible. Don't feel like it's not possible even if you have no experience beforehand. It's definitely possible to do that. So in terms of editing options, there's a number of different things that you can approach it with. So a lot of video editing software these days is actually pretty intuitive. It's quite easy to splice together clips and make basic adjustments to the final product. We talk about splicing. We're referring to joining multiple smaller clips together to form a longer video. So you can do this literally just with your iPhone and iMovie. You can just splice together different videos that you've taken on your phone to form a full video. You can add filters or color effects. You can add audio. You can add a music track to it, all just on your iPhone in a few minutes, basically. So there's a lot of different tools that you can use with that. Outside of the iPhone or Android phone, there's also desktop apps such as OpenShot, Shotcut, or DaVinci Resolve, all of which are free, that run on both Apple and PC. So these are different tools that you can use to edit the raw footage that you're filming, however you're filming it, in a pretty intuitive and simple fashion. So when it comes to live action videos, again, this is sort of the more labor efficient model of the different options that we've looked at. So if you just want to sort of test it out, I encourage you to just start doing some filming, play around with the different editing techniques to see what your options are, and then that can also spark some ideas for how you want to expand your video going forward. When it comes to screencasting, there's a couple of different software tools that we recommend. The first is the Screencast-O-Matic, which is, there's free and paid versions on Mac and Windows. This allows you to capture any part of your screen. You can add your webcam for picture-in-picture effect as well. You can add audio overlays to do a voiceover while you're working on your different screens. And you can also trim the start and end of your screen capture. Similarly, PowerPoint, if you go into the recording tab of a PowerPoint document, you can do this kind of screencasting option, which gives you the option to either include audio in your recording or not, to include the cursor or not. And it's quite a robust tool for allowing you to just very quickly and simply using this type of filming technique. So animation. So animation, as I've mentioned, this is probably the one that's a bit more labor intensive than the other options. There's a few different recommended software tools that you can use. Animaker, Powtoon, and Vyond. All of these have are either free or have free trials. If you want to just check them out to see if they're the kind of thing that are going to be useful for you. And these can really help you quickly get started with some sort of basic scenarios and setups for your animation. But again, you want to go into this thinking, how is this animation actually going to augment your video, right? So you want to go into it, check out these different tools, see what kind of options they have, and maybe that's going to help you think about ways that you could use this animation to increase the clarity of your presentation, make it more engaging, and things of that nature. So I would encourage you to check out at least one of these and just play around a little bit with a free trial to see if it's something that you might be interested in using. And finally, stop motion online tools. There's less of these than for the other mediums because it's not as common a medium to work in. This image here is actually from a very interesting GRADflix video from, I think it was the year before last, where the participant did an entire video through moving Lego figures. It was very interesting to watch. So there are a couple of different options here. You can use Animoto, which is free with Animoto branding, as well as Cloud Stop Motions. These allow you to upload videos or pictures in a sequence to create a stop motion film out of it. Okay. So when it comes to putting it all together, the tool I recommend is PowerPoint, both because you'll have access to it through your University of Waterloo account, but also because, as I mentioned, it's a surprisingly robust tool for doing this. You can set up recorded timings, animations, and autoplay videos to create sort of dynamic moving presentations, or you can simply do voiceovers and record a visually interesting slideshow, right? So there's a lot of different options you can use when it comes to putting everything together. You can download sort of video segments and incorporate those into different parts of the PowerPoint as well to have to break up in different sections. And one of the added benefits of using PowerPoint to put your videos together is it helps you naturally break down your video into distinct slides or sections, which, as we'll see in shortly, is a really important planning step. You want to be planning your video as a series of sections rather than trying to plan it as one large block of 60-second narration or video or what have you. And through PowerPoint, again, you can export as a full quality video with recorded timings and narrations once you have completed. So here's an example of what you can do with PowerPoint, which is a very short example from the person who previously held this role. So as you can see, that had a soundtrack to it. It had dynamic visuals. You could also include voiceover at different sections if you wanted to with that. And that was done entirely through PowerPoint, just importing other external videos and things like that into the autoplay feature. So definitely consider using PowerPoint to sort of play around with it and see what the different options are for creating your video. Okay, so I'm running a bit low on time here, so I'm going to go into the next section, which is tips, tricks, and best practices for your video. So some things to consider before you get started. You want to think about what is the best and most feasible type of video for your content. So I've discussed this a bit as we've gone through. There are strengths and weaknesses for each medium, and consider what your goals are for the video. So this is something that Elise is going to get into more detail with in their section of this webinar in a little bit. So I'm not going to dwell too much on it, but you want to approach it not just from a perspective of what would look cool or interesting, but what would help convey what you're trying to convey, what would help your audience have the main takeaways that you need from your 1-minute video. So planning is key. Create a script and or storyboard before you start filming. Elise also has a handout that will be made available during this session. They can help you do this as you plan through your script or your storyboard for your video. You want to plan it out in sections. You want to make sure that you have a detailed script ahead of time. You don't just want to sort of go into it willy-nilly. Aim to sound authentic rather than perfect. You're never going to have a video where you sound absolutely perfect and you're absolutely conveying the pitch perfect script that you want to. Try to make it sound natural. Try to sort of convey that this is you communicating your research and try to showcase your personality that way. Okay. All right. And try to use images to illustrate or reinforce what you're saying. So I've already mentioned this briefly earlier on, but remember that images and illustrations or animations should complement or augment the information you're trying to convey rather than distracting from it. Right. So some important filming considerations here to think about. First of all is audio quality. So consider using voiceover instead of talking heads so that you can be closer to the microphone, or try a lapel or shotgun mic. So you may not have the greatest results if you're just filming yourself from a webcam or from a distance with your phone. You might want to consider just recording separately with a voiceover so that you can make sure that you have good audio quality for your video. You don't want that sort of graininess, or you don't want a lot of background white noise in your videos. Similarly, you want to exercise a good degree of control over your filming environment, and that includes both the audio aspects as well as lighting aspects. You want to make sure that you're shooting video in a place where there's good lighting, where they can see everything that's happening, and where there's not going to be a lot of distracting audio artifacts. Similarly, make sure that you're filming from a stable base, either using a tripod or stabilizer for your phone, or a mounted camera somewhere that will allow you to have a very crisp and stable image as you film. When it comes to editing or exporting, there are various different programs that you can use. Just a quick search will bring up a number of different options for removing sound or white noise from video clips if you're using voiceover. Try to add some background music or sound effects as appropriate. That can really enhance the overall quality of a video if you have a sort of a low-level background music playing at various points, as long as it's appropriate to do so. And then pay attention to volume levels, though. So if you are including background music or sound effects, make sure they're not overwhelming or drowning out the talking narration. So always make sure that you're reviewing the final product, how it all sounds together before you export it. So ensure that photos or videos are the same dimensions and orientation. So you don't want to have a number of different orientations throughout the video. You want to keep it consistent. And when you're exporting, try to use a high quality export of 720p or higher and export to an MP4 file. Okay. So volume can be increased after the fact as well. So that, again, there's free online tools for this, such as MP3 Louder. And at some point, this will decrease quality of your volume. So make sure that you are not doing it too much. And then I think this is probably the most important tip for editing is you're not going to be able to get a perfect 60-second shot. Well, you might, but it's very unlikely. It's very hard. Generally speaking, you want to try to, again, break your video script down into distinct sections and segments and then splice them together after the fact. And that's going to lead to a much smoother, ultimately a much smoother product. And what you can do to sort of hide the different gaps or transitions is use overlays or other visuals to sort of hide that transition time during your presentation. Okay, so before I turn it over to Elise, a couple of additional tools and resources to help you get started. And you will have access to these PDFs following the live session here, so you'll be able to review this in the future as well. So you can access free online tutorials at LinkedIn Learning. You can utilize your free Office 365 account. Canva and Adobe Spark have different templates for graphics or animations that you can use just to have a starting point for how you can get started with those types of things. And then you can also make use of open licensed content to avoid the need for attributions, right? So if you're looking for stock images or stock videos, places like Pixabay or Bensound or Unsplash have lots of different available materials that you can be using. And you can also make sure when you're using other content around the web, make sure to review Lauren's tip sheet on licensing and copyright, as well as consider the different tips that she'll be going over at the end of this webinar. And finally, we already had a question in the chat about this, but watch GRADflix examples. So there's the GRADflix playlist on YouTube with over 38 different examples of finalist videos from previous GRADflix competitions. You also see winning videos on the GRADflix website. So these are some fantastic examples of different work that people have done at the University of Waterloo and can really help inspire you to sort of think about what you want to be doing for your video. And when you're looking through these, just consider, because these might be fantastic videos, but they're never going to be perfect. So you can also consider not only what are they doing well, but what are some things that maybe distracted you or was only somewhat effective, or what was particularly effective. So try to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of these videos, and then think about how you could apply that to your own video as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elise. So I'll ask them to share their screen, and they'll be walking you through how to communicate your research in a 1-minute video.
There we go. Sorry, I forgot how to unmute myself. There we go. Hi, folks. So yes, my name is Elise, and I'm here to talk to you about how to communicate your research. I'm going to go pretty quickly through a couple of different foundational concepts that are really geared towards getting you to make decisions that will help you communicate your research. So from the start where you're planning to the end when you're revising and doing those finishing touches, you want to be thinking about who you're talking to and why. You also want to be thinking about how to bring all of your ideas together in an order that makes sense and is memorable for your audience. And then finally, you want to be thinking about how to use multimodal communication. So more than one mode, not just text, but text and audio and movement and all that kind of stuff. How you can add information to your video using those different modes of communication. So we're going to start by talking about your audience and your purpose, which are two really important parts of the sort of rhetorical context of your presentation. And that means, the things that go into whether or not your video is communicating clearly and effectively and persuasively to your audience. So the first thing I really encourage you to do when you're planning your video is to think about who your audience is. Now, you don't necessarily know exactly who's going to be in the audience, but you do know some information about your audience, and you can make some educated guesses about how they feel, what they know, what they're curious about. So we know that the audience of the GRADflix videos are other researchers at the University of Waterloo, and to some extent the general public once it gets public. But your first audience, the one you really want to be talking to, is an academic, non-specialist audience who is familiar with how research works. They're probably familiar with the University of Waterloo, but they're maybe not an expert in your field or even someone who's familiar with your field at all, right? These are people from all of the faculties, all of the disciplines on campus. So when you're thinking about this audience, I would encourage you to spend 5-10 minutes kind of jotting down some notes, thinking about, what does this audience care about? What values do we have in common? What do they understand to be the purpose of research? What things about my research are they maybe already kind of aware of, right? What references or comparisons can I make that would be relevant to their life? And what things maybe do I need to explain in a little bit more detail? So you can do some educated guessing on this, right? Based on your knowledge of friends that you have in different disciplines, or people that you know from different universities even. And if you're really struggling with like, I don't know what other people know or don't know, that's a great thing to bring to the drop-in, to an appointment with a WCC specialist, or just to chat with one of your friends about, right? Getting a sense of how other people think about your research is going to help you make decisions about what you need to talk about, what you need to explain, what kinds of references or metaphors you can use. We're all on campus. And so, maybe you want to make a comment about geese and you can relate geese to your research, because we all know about geese. So once you've figured out generally what you think your audience cares about when it comes to your research, what you need to explain to them, you can then start thinking about what you want your video to do for your audience. So of course, in general, everyone's goal for the GRADflix video is to communicate their research and do it in like an interesting, engaging, memorable way. But you should also have a kind of secondary goal that gives you some direction, right? Maybe you want to convince people that there's a problem that they need to care about solving. And that's going to be a different video than if you want to get people to feel excited about these really theoretical questions that they've never thought of before, and really, consider the vastness of the universe. Or that's going to be different than a video that inspires people to change or gets people to feel some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Feel some kind of, empathy for a group of people that they've never heard of before. So thinking about your goal beyond I want to win, beyond I want to talk about my research, what do you want to do for your audience? What do you want that video to accomplish for the people watching it? And think about those verbs. Am I convincing them, inspiring them, informing? Am I making them feel something? And write that down on like a Post-it note or in a document alongside your description of your audience, so that when you're trying to decide, well, what picture should I use? What graph should I use? What video, what sound should I use? You can kind of go back and go, I should use the one that's maybe more exciting or more upsetting or whatever. So you think about your audience, you think about what you want to achieve with the video. You should also think about that core message of your research. So depending on where you are in your research process, maybe you know really well how to explain your research to your supervisor, but your audience is not your supervisor for this video. And so being able to explain it to someone who has all of the knowledge that you already have is very different than explaining it to someone who is interested but not aware of all of those sort of details. They maybe don't have the foundational information that you do. So I encourage you also to take a few minutes, take a step back, and really reflect on what is the thing that is important about your research. And one way that you can do this is kind of finish these sentences, right? You can start by saying, this is what I'm working on, right? I'm working on something specific. I'm working on this problem. I'm working on this cultural issue. I'm working on this, abstract question. I'm working on this book, right? What's the thing that you're talking about? And then tell us why, right? So I'm working on something specific because I want to find out something interesting, right? I want to find out which solution is best, or I want to figure out what it meant to the people who were doing it at that time, or why something happened, or what the effects of that thing ended up being, or how it works, or what we're going to do about it in the future, right? What is the reason for caring about this question? And then finally, you want to bring it back to the audience, because again, this video is for your audience. So why do you want to tell this information to the audience of GRADflix? Well, it's to get them to understand why it matters, or how to fix it, or to know what we did wrong, or know how to do it better next time, or know not to do next time. To give them a sense of not just what your research is, but what that research is doing in the sort of bigger picture of research as a process of knowledge, right? Because your research doesn't exist in a vacuum. So help your audience understand how that fits together. So it's a lot to ask to talk about your research in 1 minute, right? Especially if you're working on a thesis or dissertation length project. And so you really are going to have to focus in on that core message, that core purpose, that single story or scene or event. I'm not asking you to oversimplify or trivialize your research, but you are probably going to have to cut out some of the stuff that is like super cool and nitty gritty and nuanced that maybe only you and your peers care about. So maybe that's the really important story, in which case that's what you need to plan your video around. How can I get my audience to care about this really nitty gritty question? Or maybe your video takes a bigger picture look at your research, or it looks at something that's maybe a little bit easier to explain, but still gets across that core message. So keeping an eye on your audience, remembering what your goal is, what you want the audience to feel after they've watched your video, and then thinking about what it is you want to tell them about your research. Those are really important first steps in putting your video together, because once you know those things, you can start to put it together in a kind of story or structure where the ideas are connected to each other in a way that makes sense to your watchers. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of different structures that you can use. They're certainly not the end of the story. Sorry, I went to this slide too early. They're certainly not the end of the story. There are so many different structures you can use. And you can mix and match, you can adapt them, you can revise them. But I wanted to give you a couple to start with so that you can kind of think about how ideas might fit together. So one that's really effective is an elevator pitch style, where you kind of take a very small amount of time, like the time it takes to get from floor 1 to floor 5 in an elevator, to convince someone that your research is interesting or that they should care about it. They should come see your talk. They should check out your journal article. They should watch the video. So the way to construct an elevator pitch is to start with a hook or something interesting to really sort of get the attention of your audience, get them interested. So maybe you intrigue them with some kind of interesting problem, or you shock them with a scary statistic or a startling statistic, or you pose them a question that they've never thought of before, right? Imagine if you were in this situation, or what would you do if this happened to you? Sort of get them invested with some kind of hook. And you can check out, a good way to learn how hooks work is to check out like news websites and just look at their headlines and their first couple of sentences. What kinds of things do people put in those first few lines to get you interested in reading the whole story? So once you've hooked them in, your job is to then make them understand how it works. So you want to relate your research to the hook and to things that your audience is aware of, or your audience understands, right? So maybe you use a reference or a metaphor, or you say it's sort of like reading a recipe. You know, you need to make sure the information's there first, because otherwise you're going to end up making an apple pie instead of a pumpkin pie. Some kind of thing that gets your audience to understand how your research relates to them and to the hook. And then a really good pitch ends with a kind of impactful, like, ooh, yeah, I feel something. I feel excited to change the world now, or I feel curious about this question, or I'm gonna do something different tomorrow when I wake up. You want to end a hook with something satisfying. So, or you end an elevator pitch with something satisfying. So this is a really common, very persuasive structure, but it does tend to work most seamlessly with research that has a kind of like problem, solution, cause, effect, question, answer kind of format. And so if your research doesn't really vibe with that kind of like, oh, I'm solving a specific problem with my research, you might want to go with something a little more free-flowing, a little more storytelling based, like the traditional narrative structure. I'm going to describe the traditional narrative structure, but you can, of course, play around with this as well and make it work for the story that you're telling. But the storytelling structure, which is the sort of how generally we tell stories, the order in which information shows up, once upon a time, then something happens, the end kind of thing. Really, really useful when you have actual people in your research, because then you can say like, these people, once upon a time, these characters existed. But you can also use it for like events, histories, something sort of more abstract as well, if you think about your ideas as the characters that you want to introduce. So generally, the storytelling structure is really persuasive because people are pretty familiar with it, and like we're used to hearing exciting stories in this structure. So it kind of feels like when we're being told a story, it feels like it's going to be exciting. And so you want to start by introducing your characters, right? Once upon a time, this happened, or these people existed. And then you want to show how they are being changed by something, right? Maybe they make a decision, or maybe someone else makes a decision, or some event happens to change their lives or change how they exist, right? Once upon a time, people lived happily in the village, and then one day the dragon came. Maybe the dragon's good, maybe the dragon's bad, I don't know. Once you have introduced this thing that changes the characters, you can start moving into the climax. So the most exciting part of the story is where something big happens, right? Maybe there's some kind of conflict, or maybe there's a moment where two people meet, or maybe two ideas become one concept, or something happens to the obstacle or challenge, right? Some event happens that then changes the wider world of your story. And that's the falling action, where you start to say, okay, so here's what happened after that climax, that big moment. And then finally you end with the resolution, which is just like, now the world is a different place, right? And they lived happily ever after, or not, depending on your research. So this is a really, really effective structure when you have stories in your research, but it can also be used to talk about more abstract concepts. But maybe you don't want to force it, right? If something's not naturally fitting into that story structure for you, or it doesn't feel like it's the right fit, try something else. See what works better, what feels right to you. Now, the last structure that I want to talk to you about is a very basic one that's really effective for those of you who haven't quite finished your research, right? So maybe you don't have answers, maybe you don't have solutions, maybe you don't quite know what the happily ever after is, but you do know why you're doing your research and what that research is probably going to look like. So you can still tell the story of your research in a really interesting way. And so you want to kind of start by saying, here's the big picture. Here's what's going on. Here's why people care about this topic. Here's the things that we agree on in this field, right? Overall, here's the deal. Then you want to move into a kind of like, however moment, where you sort of say, but, you know, we don't know this yet, or we haven't figured out how to do this yet, or we're not asking the right questions, or we're not asking the right people the right questions, or we're coming up with the wrong answers. Some kind of issue that makes room for your research project, right? Where then you can say, so here's what my research is going to do. Here's how I'm going to dig into that problem or that question or that gap. So this is a really persuasive way to get people to believe that the research you're doing is important and fits into a research discipline. However, it is often very tempting to spend most of the time talking about overall and the however, and then you kind of leave the so my research to the end. And that is the wrong way to do it. This is a video about your research and why it matters. So I think even if you're just starting your research, the bulk of this video should still be in the so my research phase, where you kind of say, so here's the problem that I'm going to try to address, or here's the question I'm going to try to answer. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's why I think it's going to work out this way, right? At the very least, try to make sure you're split about half and half between the overall, however, and so my research. Try not to spend more time than that, because you want to make sure that the bulk of that video is like, here's how awesome my research is going to be. And I will reiterate again, it is difficult to fit a huge research story in 1 minute, even though the 3 structures I told you are all sort of geared towards really quick descriptions of your research. The solution is not to just talk faster, so bear with me. Although it is possible to cram more words in if you just speak faster and never breathe and cut every gap between words so that you fill every moment in time with speech, and therefore you get more and more and more meaning, more and more content, more and more and more, it doesn't actually mean that you're communicating what you think you're communicating. Instead, when you are scripting your video, make sure you leave time to breathe for you, for your audience. And so when you find yourself writing a script that is longer than 1 minute, the solution is not to talk faster. The solution is to think about, what do I need to take out or rearrange so that these ideas flow naturally together and I get across my big picture, my goal, my core message to my audience in the time that I have. And a video that is well organized and slow is going to do a much better job than a video that crams everything in. Because even though you get that content in, your audience is not going to receive it. So once you've figured out, here's the things I need to include to tell my message to my audience, now you can start thinking about adding that cool, fun stuff, the feeling, the passion, the excitement, the curiosity, the flavor, right? So the stuff that isn't just the facts, I did this and I did that and I'm doing this, but like, I'm doing this because it's important, because it's going to solve this issue, or it's going to cause someone else to do something different. And I'm really excited about it, right? Think about how you want to connect your ideas, not just in terms of first, second, and last, but in terms of like, this leads into this, and I'm doing this because of this, right? What is that? So what? Why does this stuff matter? And another way that you can add information in, so not just by adding words to your script, but you can also add information through other modes. So when you're making a video, you have access not just to movement, right, but sound. So you have narration, you have music, you have ambient noise, you have moving images, moving illustrations, you have icons, you have photographs and maps and graphs, and you have text, and you have layout, and you have color, and you have the connection between all of these things. So when you're thinking about what to add or what to design in your video to get your message across, I really want you to be thinking about, how do these modes help me communicate my message? Not just, how can I show a cool thing? Although, you know, showing a cool thing is fun also. But as Graham already mentioned, creating a storyboard is really a great place to start when you're planning a presentation, right? You really, or planning a video especially. It's tempting to just write a script and then animate it or draw it or make it in PowerPoint. But the problem with that is that you're going to end up spending a lot of time making mistakes, which is natural. Right? You're not going to get it perfect on the first try. And so if you do your first couple of tries as a storyboard rather than as a draft video, you're going to be able to get through those ideas a lot faster. And it'll be a lot easier for you to sort of decide not to do something. You know, if you spend 3 hours making a video in PowerPoint, it's going to be a lot harder to delete that video than to set aside a storyboard that took you 10 minutes to make. So when you're starting to plan your video, I would encourage you to actually take out a piece of paper and a pencil or some sticky notes and literally sketch it out as messy as you can. Right? The goal is not to have a beautiful storyboard. The goal is to have a useful storyboard that will help you decide what works and what doesn't. So once you're ready to start actually putting things together, you're going to want to think about how you use text, how you use images, how you use video and sound. And I want to give you some sort of touchstones to think about. So just as it is not helpful to just talk faster, it is equally unhelpful to just add text to your slide or to your video or to your scene. So if you have things to say that are really important, you need to find a way to say it in the video rather than having you say something out loud and then have like a paragraph of text on screen that you're hoping people will just like understand. Because if you're pulling their attention between what's on screen and what they're hearing, they're going to lose something. Right? They're not going to pay attention to all of it. So if you're going to use text, which you should, right? Text is great. It's part of the multiple modes you have access to. Keep it short, keep it snappy, keep it something that's easy to kind of read in a second, right? So a short sentence with simple language or a caption for a figure that certainly could use some specific terminology, but it isn't asking the audience to kind of understand a super complicated concept that isn't supported by audio. So if you're going to use text, try to keep it connected to the sounds that people are hearing and the images that are on screen, and try to keep it fairly simple and easy for people to sort of get into their eyeballs. When the same kind of goes for graphs and other visuals as well, because many of you probably have data that you have visualized in some way as graphs or tables or charts. Awesome. Data visualization is an effective tool in your arsenal, but this is not the same as a journal article. So the table that someone can spend 30 minutes poring over in your article is not going to be effective in a 1-minute video, right? So you want to simplify it, figure out the best way to visualize it. Maybe it's a really simple graph. Maybe you want to do something more fun. So the bar chart race is on Flourish, app.flourish.studio. They've got a few other data viz animation templates there as well to kind of give a little bit more movement to your data and also to get that message across really easily and quickly without people having to even really read the graph. So simplify your charts, make them focus on the message. So you may also not have charts or data. I don't have data in my research. And so instead I might rely on pictures or photographs that I can take of the people or places or events that are relevant. I can come up with visual metaphors or illustrations. I can use existing GIFs, existing videos. Maybe my research is literally about how keys work, in which case that GIF of a key unlocking something works, but my research may also be the key to figuring something out. In which case it's also a useful GIF that I could use. So I have a list of things, places where you can find images, videos, tools that you can use. It's very informal and it's just sort of a list for myself as I make it, but I've been sharing it with people because why not? So you can go to bit.ly/stockphotos, etc. and find some of these places. But keep an eye on the licensing, as we'll talk about in another presentation. Another thing that I would encourage you to think about when you are planning the images and imagery that you're going to be using is making sure that you are matching the real world diversity that you're working with in your research, right? So if your research exists in the real world, which I assume it does, it probably involves people of multiple races and genders and body types and abilities. And so do your best to find images that accurately represent that diversity. And I've got a section in my list of things that you can check out as well. So I'm just about at the end, but I want to tell you a bit about using your voice and using other sounds to help you communicate your message. So if you do decide to narrate, I think that's a good idea. You don't have to, but narration is a great way to literally get your voice in there and communicate, get across how excited you are about your research. But in order to do so, you really do need to perform, right? So you're not just reading a script, right? I wouldn't just say, perform with your voice, pace, tone, volume, let your passion shine through, think about how your voice implies things about your message. Not interesting, right? Instead, I would say something like, hey, perform with your voice, use your pace, the speed at which you're speaking, the tone of voice, whether you're speaking at a higher tone or a lower tone, use your volume, speak louder to express excitement, and maybe speak more quietly and softly if you want people to think about things a little more, right? Communicate your interest, your passion, your feeling with your voice so that people can hear it, right? Not just understand the words, but really feel what's going on. If you are also using other sounds, so not just your voice, but things like ambient noise or music, try to make sure that you're choosing something that matches. So I'm not sure this sound works. If it doesn't, we're listening to a car do something while we're looking at a picture of geese flying over a sunset. There we go. I'm going to do it this way. And maybe your research is about urban sprawl and how it's pushing animals out of their natural habitat, in which case having cars over a beautiful picture of geese actually kind of works, but maybe it doesn't, right? So if you're thinking of adding music, adding sound, choose sounds that match your message, right? Choose sounds that are actually telling you things about your research, about the story that you're trying to tell. Don't just choose music for the sake of having music. Choose music that's going to tell something to your audience. So as Angela mentioned, communication is 50% of the judging criteria. So no matter how pretty or beautiful your video is, if you're not using images and sounds and movement and videos to tell a story that gets your audience interested and understanding what your research is doing, it's not going to be a successful video. So I would rather see, your best attempt to make a video that isn't beautiful, but actually tells me how excited you are about your research. That's so much more interesting to me as your audience, because if I want to see something beautiful, I can just go do that. You're the only one who can tell me about your research. So that's it. That's all I have to say. And I'm happy to work with anyone on this. I'll be at the drop-ins, of course. And you can always make an appointment with the WCC to work through some of these questions. We're always happy to chat with you about your GRADflix projects.
Okay, thank you so much, Elise. So we're going to turn over to the final section now. If Lauren would like to start sharing her screen to discuss copyright considerations.
Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 second here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so really what I want to talk to you about is copyright and how it fits into making your video. I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet, just to make sure that we have enough time for questions at the end. And so we'll just talk about what copyright is really briefly, and then some of the main considerations for using it, using other folks' work in your video. So copyright is the right to produce a work or a substantial part of it, to reproduce a work or a substantial part of it, or to publish a work or a substantial part of it. So the key here is that we are reusing or using some kind of work, and the portion of it that we're using of it is large enough that it is substantial. And this is important because when we're talking about a single sentence quote from someone, or maybe one frame of 1,000 frames in a video, that might not be considered substantial, and therefore copyright protections might not apply. Determining substantiality of a work can be kind of tricky. And so if there's anything I want you to get out of this portion of the presentation is, if you have any questions about how copyright applies in your video, you can reach out to copyright@uwaterloo.ca, and that reaches me and a few other copyright folks on campus who can give you some guidance as to what you should or shouldn't do in your video. We aren't lawyers, and so we can't give legal advice, but we can guide you along the way to making a good decision. So I'm just going to glaze over these, but there are a few times when you don't need permission. So the first is for facts and ideas. So facts, anything that is demonstrably true, there's no copyright protection over these things. That's to help maintain the ease of use of these kinds of materials. You can't own a fact. Same with ideas. So ideas are a little bit more tricky, but so the way someone expresses an idea can be copyright protected, but the idea itself isn't copyright protected. One of the best ways to think about this is in terms of novels. So if the idea of two people falling in love and going on an adventure isn't copyright protected. A story of in a romance novel might be, but there might be several different iterations of a romance novel, and you can't copyright the idea of a romance novel. Another thing that isn't that you don't require permission for is content that's in the public domain. And public domain is when the copyright has expired in a work. So these are usually very old works. In Canada, currently copyright lasts for the life of an author and then 50 years after their death. So Popeye, as pictured here, Popeye is in the public domain because the creator of Popeye died in 1939. And so way more than enough time has passed since their death so that the materials they created are in the public domain. The other thing that doesn't require permission is anything that you can use according to the Creative Commons license. So both Elise and Graham touched on appropriate licensing of content. And so you may see the symbols here listed on a number of different sources for images, music, and video. These licenses at their very most restrictive allow you to reshare the content. Really what you're looking for in terms of creating your video is going to be something that doesn't have the no derivatives on it. No derivatives means that you can't adapt the content. So any of these other licenses would be just fine as long as you follow the terms. You can't follow a no derivatives term because you're remixing the content in with your own content. But if you have any questions about, what does this Creative Commons or CC license mean? Does it mean I can use my content, this content in my video? Just reach out to copyright@uwaterloo and we'll get you sorted. Following Creative Commons licenses in terms of providing attribution, so some kind of a citation at the end of your video or near where you use the content is really important, as we're seeing an uptick in what we would call colloquially copyright trolls. So folks who put Creative Commons works on the internet with more of a for-profit model in mind. So they're actively looking for people who don't cite them properly and then seeking payment for reuse. So just to underscore to really make sure that you're providing proper attribution. Like I say, it doesn't necessarily have to be right beside the content, but as long as that attribution is part of your video, a final reference slide is perfectly fine. Finally, if it's not covered by one of those other exceptions, so public domain, Creative Commons licenses, or ideas or facts, you may be able to use content on what's called the non-commercial user-generated content exception in the Copyright Act. And so this exception allows you to use materials that have been made available to the public in a new work that you're creating, so your video, as long as you're not using the work for commercial purposes. And so for the purposes of this competition, we don't consider the prize to make the use of the work commercial. Commercial would be if you were trying to sell the video for money. You need to mention the source of the content. You have to start with a legal version of the work, so you can't use a pirated or other sort of a legal version of a work to use it legally. You have to start with a good source copy. If you have trouble assessing the legality of a work, you can always reach out to us and we'll help you out. And then finally, that your work doesn't have a substantial adverse effect on the owner's work. So that would be usually if you're using the work in a negative light or associating it with a very controversial application, then it might have an adverse effect on the owner's ability to make money off of their work, but that likely doesn't apply in your videos. So if you have any questions at all, please just ask, send an email to us at copyright@uwaterloo. That makes sure that I don't miss it in my inbox if I'm away, and it makes sure it gets attention as quickly as possible. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from you all. I'll toss it back to Graham.
All right, thanks so much, Lauren. So we're going to turn it over now to a live Q&A session. So we have our 4 panelists here, including myself, and we're happy to take any questions that are coming in at the moment. We obviously have some questions that came in during the course of the presentations, and we'll go over those for everyone in case anyone missed those in the chat now. But also, as we're doing that, if anyone would like to, write new questions into the Q&A, we'll be happy to answer them as best as we're able to. So I think we'll start off while people are sort of typing their new questions. We'll start off by going through some of the ones that already have come through. We've answered these in the chat, but we'd like to answer them sort of verbally as well. So one of the first ones that came in early on was, do we have access to previous winning videos? And the answer is definitely yes. As we mentioned later in the presentation, all of the previous finalist videos are available through the GRADflix website, as well as interviews with past finalists and winners as well that you might want to check out just for some tips and ideas for what their perspectives are on it, as well as the GRADflix YouTube channel has a number of different finalist videos that you can check out for inspiration. So you definitely have access to those. If you have any questions about how to access those, feel free to send us an email at gradventure@uwaterloo.ca, and that email will be in the follow-up email that you get after this Eventbrite, through the Eventbrite management system, that will give you all the information, including the PDF versions of these slides and things like that, that you can access the different materials. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add to that question?
No, besides just definitely check out some of the previous winning videos. They're really good, and there's such a good range that I'm hoping that if you look at, say, 5 or 10, you'll probably get some inspiration for what will work best for you. Sort of speaking to what Elise was saying about what style of video will help you communicate your message.
Yeah, absolutely. There's such a tremendous range there. Like Angela says, like, as I mentioned during the presentation, there's stop motion Lego video, there's animated videos, there's voiceover slideshow videos, there's all kinds of different amazing content up there. Okay, so let's, I still don't see any new questions coming in, so we'll move on to another one here. So one of the questions that came in was, can the video be an introduction to a research topic for students that might just be starting the master's or their PhD and they don't really necessarily have a lot of completed research? So I think that, and Angela can weigh in on this whenever she would like to step in, but the answer to this is yes, you can. We have had researchers in the past who were just getting started, who had gotten their proposal accepted. They were establishing their methodology. But they hadn't completed anything, not anything, but they hadn't completed their project yet, and that's completely fine. A lot of because all of you are competitors, as competitors are current graduate students, most of you will not necessarily have completed your research at this stage, and that's completely fine. So you can talk about what you've done so far, or you can talk about the methodology you're going to be using, what you hope to achieve with your research, why it's important. There's all kinds of different things that you can discuss in relation to that. Angela, did you have anything to add on that subject?
No, I think you did great, but I would love to pass it to Elise to see if she has any recommendations for, if you are just starting your MRP or your dissertation, how would you frame a video like that?
Yeah, for sure. So really any structure could work for this. The one that I think is the most well suited to research that isn't quite done yet is creating a research space where you say that overall, however, so my research will, because this is the format that people use when they're writing like proposals and stuff. But outside of even the sort of structure that you want to use, I would still encourage you to think about what it is you can say about your research. So not just, this is the field I'm working in and here's my topic and it's important, but like get the audience interested in, why you're doing it this way and not some other way, or why you're using this kind of problem set or this kind of text or this kind of object to do it and not something else, and what people could do with your research once it's done. So a really useful sort of way to do that is to get people to imagine a future in which your research is complete. Right? What could it be like in the future if you do all the things you set out to do? So even if you're just at the start of your research project, you can still get us interested and excited about what you're actually going to do, not just the fact that you're going to do it. So make sure that you're still spending a lot of time in the video telling me how your research is going to have an impact.
Yeah, I think that's oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's really great, Elise. And so do you think it's okay for students to say things in their video like, if my experiment succeeds, would something like that be okay?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you don't want to just be like, yeah, so it's definitely going to work out this way, because that's not how research works. But certainly you probably have a hypothesis, right? You have an educated guess of what you're hoping will happen, right? If my experiment succeeds, if this all works out the way I think it is, I think what I'm going to find is this. Or maybe you do research where you really don't know what the answer could be, but you've probably still got a reason why you're doing your analysis this way, right? So I'm choosing to do it this way because it's going to let me see who's interested and why they're doing it and when it started, and all of these things matter because something, right? So you can make educated guesses, or you can explain why you're making the choices you're making and the impact you think those are going to have on the knowledge that you're creating.
Thanks so much, Elise. That was a fantastic answer. A lot of useful advice there. So we had a couple of different questions about credit and references in the videos. So I'd like to just toss it over to Lauren and Angela, perhaps, to speak on that a little bit in terms of, do you have to provide references or citations during your research video? And do you have to provide the credits for the different sort of images, for example, that you're using? And if so, how do you go about doing that? So would either or both of you like to speak on that?
Maybe I'll start and just speak more generally. So I think one of the questions sort of came about, if you have someone else doing the voiceover for you, because it doesn't necessarily have to be your voice. I think that's more just about being upfront and honest. And so if it's your partner or a lab mate, you can ask them if they would like to be credited. You know, the main thing is that the video, like if that's the case, you would say, you know, you still have to create the script. You still have to be the one creating the video. You're simply borrowing someone's time and their voice. And so, you know, just sort of being honest and upfront. Many of our students and our previous winners have just ended the video with a credit slide, citing the sources that they used in the beginning. And there you could, for example, give credit to my friend Lauren, whose voice I used in my video. So something like that is absolutely possible. But when it comes to sources that have sort of copyright implications or sources that are out there in the public domain and bringing them into your video, that's where I'll give it to Lauren to discuss further.
Yeah, sure. So what you said, Angela, about having a final references slide is perfectly fine. You may find that you come across images that have very specific citation requirements. These are few and far between, but sometimes there will be a requirement to have a specific citation and for it to be placed in a very visible spot. If you come across those and you're confused about it, just let me know and we can help you out. But generally, final reference slide in a kind of, you know, slide 1, image 1 comes from here, sort of a model is perfectly fine. And I always recommend that people just generally stick to whatever citation method that they're already familiar with. Something that helps people get to the content and know where it came from. Copyright does not require you to use any specific citation style. It's all about attribution to the author. So whatever is easy.
And related to that, I think it should be noted just for clarity that you're not expected to take time out of your 60 seconds to go over your references at the end. You can have them as a static slide that just ends the video. You don't need to, you know, take 5% of your video to sort of say, here's my references and like that. So you don't have to do anything active about that during the actual video. Okay. All right, so are there any other questions that have come in? I don't see. So one question that came in towards the end here was, will we have access to this video later? And the answer is yes. Angela mentioned in the chat, and I mentioned during the presentation, the recording of this video will be available under training sessions in the GRADflix resources page of our website. There'll be a link to that in the follow-up email that you'll receive through the Eventbrite management system after this event. And that'll be up by the end of the week. And then, yes, you'll also have access to the PowerPoint, the PDF slides for this presentation as well, for the webinar. Okay. I don't see any other questions come in. I guess for our panelists, are there any last thoughts that, or maybe perhaps like frequently asked questions that you've heard in the past that you would like to address before we conclude the webinar today? Anything that hasn't come up so far?
I'll just say, you know, the GRADflix was created because, you know, we had the 3-minute thesis competition, which you may have heard of, which is an oral presentation. We've had other opportunities to do with public speaking, and maybe public speaking isn't your thing. And so GRADflix is such a cool opportunity for you to share your research in a way that maybe requires a different skill set, a different research communication skill set. Or maybe you're an excellent public speaker and you have those skills nailed down and you want to learn something new. You know, these videos are a way to get your research out there in ways that I feel like our 3-minute thesis competition wouldn't do. We've had previous winners put a copy of their video on their LinkedIn profile, and their hiring managers ended up emailing them, you know, oh, by the way, great GRADflix video. Videos are so easily shared. Think about how we use them all the time through social media and on LinkedIn and through emails. You could put a little link to your video in your email signature. It's fun. It's meant to be fun. I hope that when you competition, you'll view this as an opportunity to do something creative and have a little bit of an outlet that's still related to your research, but maybe not as all-consuming as doing the actual research or writing your thesis. I laughed when Elise said, you know, you could envision a future where your thesis is done. And it's like, yeah, didn't we all do that at some point? But truly, it's such a great opportunity, such a great competition, and I really hope you register because I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. I feel like I almost cut you off there, Elise, so I'll let you have your final words. Oh no, okay. Perfect. Yeah, so with that, I think just, register, come to the next drop-in session. You don't even have to register before it, so that you have the opportunity to get feedback on your ideas. Elise will be there. Lauren has made herself available via email during and after that event. Graham and I will both be there. So even if you're just on the fence, start thinking about it, jot some notes down, and come to that drop-in session. Oh, and Elise does have one more thought.
I do have a thing to say. At the Writing Communication Center, we're also really excited to help you like brainstorm stuff. So if you've got an idea and you just want to bounce it off of someone's brain, that's a perfectly legitimate appointment to make. So you don't have to wait until you've got something to show us. If you just want to chat about it with someone, you can always make an appointment.
Excellent. So there's a couple of final questions that are just being answered in the chat right now, but we are a bit over time, so we will end the recording at least at this point. So if you'd like to just take another minute or two to like look at the different questions that have been posted, that's fine. That's great. But thank you so much for all of you for coming out today and taking the time to do this training session. We definitely encourage you all to register for the GRADflix competition this year, as Angela said. We think you'll have a great time doing it. It's a great opportunity. And please feel free to come to us with any questions you have, gradventure@uwaterloo.ca. We're happy to help you out with the process. And also you'll be receiving a follow-up email, as I mentioned, with information about the drop-in sessions. The next drop-in session, the first drop-in session is November 17th. So if you are just trying to get started, or if you have any other questions, once you actually started like working on your video, please bring those to the drop-in session and we'll help you in a one-on-one format there. All right, so thank you very much, everyone, and we'll wish you a good day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.